one can see how it would be appealing to the central bankers who would be interested in taking the efficiencies that are built into a blockchain system, a cryptocurrency system, and using those for the benefit of the central bank. So essentially issuing a new type of fiat, but instead of physical paper or Federal Reserve notes, it could be a new Fed coin or something along those lines. And one can imagine how that could very quickly become a almost unimaginable tool of totalitarianism.
What do you get when you combine SD bullion and the New Zealand Mint? You get the lowest price silver coin ever released to the world. Introducing the Roaring Lion, a 1 ounce, 4 nines fine silver coin with micro engraving security that retails for lower than some of our competitors sell silver bullion rounds for. Check out this magnificent beast, the Roaring Lion silver coin, at sdbullion.com/roaring. That's sdbullion.com/roaring. All right, all right, all right.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with silverdoctors.com, and back with us today is James Corbett from the Corbett Report. James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure to be here, Elijah.
I'd first like to discuss Bitcoin, because you recently actually made a documentary about Bitcoin and kind of demystifying it for a lot of people, because a lot of terms are being thrown out, blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, and there's a lot of confusion out there because all these 4 terms, aren't the same thing, and people are getting confused about. Some people saying, it could be the bankers could take over the world with this technology, and also it could free us all and stuff like that. People are saying, but in reality, both of those can actually be true. You say, because we're talking about different things at the same time. Did you want to enlighten us about that?
Yes. Well, it strikes me that the analogy has been made, but let's make it again, that the cryptocurrency space that we're in right now is something akin to the internet, say 1992, when most people had no idea what the internet was, how on earth it would impact their day-to-day lives, what it would do for them. They were just hearing these terms for the first time and really trying to struggle to come to grips with them. As with any cutting-edge new technology that comes along and is slowly being introduced to the public, there's a steep learning curve, and we are on that steep learning curve in the cryptocurrency space right now. So people are talking about Bitcoin and blockchain and digital currency and all of this, and not a lot of people in the general public have a grasp on what these terms actually mean, so that there's a lot of charlatanry that goes around with regards to this. So in that documentary that I did, the Bitcoin PSYOP, I did feature Andreas Antonopoulos, who's one of the best speakers out there on the subject of Bitcoin, who's been proselytizing for Bitcoin for years now and is really does some incredible talks. So if people haven't seen him, they should check him out. All of his talks are up there for free on YouTube. And he did one called Blockchain versus BS, which I think was particularly enlightening with this regards. What he's talking about is right now we have a lot of people coming along and creating hype and riding the hype wave of blockchain. It's a word that a lot of people have heard at this point, but again, not many people know what it is. So they'll just hear something as blockchain or blockchain enabled or blockchain based, and okay, where do I sign up? Where, give me the dotted line. And his point was that essentially blockchain and Bitcoin, first and foremost, are not interchangeable terms. Blockchain is a type of technology. It is an open source decentralized ledger, or at least it can be an open source decentralized ledger that is maintained by the various nodes on the network, meaning that instead, for the first time in human history, really, instead of needing a single central authority to be a ledger keeper, you can have a decentralized ledger. You can have a ledger that is sent simultaneously everywhere on an open distributed network, and everyone has the same copy of the ledger, and everyone is simultaneously updating their ledger. How is this possible? Well, there's some ins and outs to that I describe in the documentary, but the point is that is one of the key underlying technological innovations that gave birth to Bitcoin. In fact, Bitcoin and blockchain kind of were born at the same time, and some people would argue out of necessity because they think that there is there needs to be a monetary incentive to maintaining a ledger, an open source decentralized ledger, and that monetary incentive is built into the Bitcoin network by the fact that when you do work on the Bitcoin network to secure the ledger and update the ledger, you are rewarded with Bitcoin. So it's a type of in a sense a token that you get for doing work on the Bitcoin network. But the point is that Bitcoin is a type of cryptocurrency which can be traded and can be used as a currency online. But it is not the same as the blockchain technology which underlies that network. And that might sound like a subtle distinction, but it's an extremely important one, especially as Andreas Antonopoulos gets into, when you get people coming along trying to sell, oh, this is a blockchain innovation, oh, we've got a new blockchain company. If you can change the word blockchain for database, then there's really nothing new going on here. There's no need to have an open source decentralized ledger that's simultaneously available everywhere in the world if all you're doing is running a database. So there's a lot of hype that's going on right now. A lot of people are being bamboozled. A lot of people are being misled. And a lot of people are being confused when they see central bankers talking about the blockchain and they want the blockchain. Oh, that must mean central bankers are behind Bitcoin, right? Well, not necessarily. No, because they can be different and separate things. And I think it sounds like this is in some ways even more difficult to understand than just the terms themselves. But it's important to understand there is a distinction here because, again, people can be bamboozled so easily. And I give the example in that documentary of the Long Island Blockchain Corporation, which was formerly the Long Island Iced Tea Corporation, literally just put the word blockchain into their company name, not really reflecting any change whatsoever in the product itself, and their stock price tripled overnight. That is a bubble, and that's what we're experiencing right now, precisely because people do not understand these terms.
Right, and specifically, like with blockchain, how do you think it could revolutionize like the financial system if it could? Do you think it could really liberate us from the bankers, or is blockchain the thing that could kind of have the bankers take us over with?
Well, blockchain as an abstract concept, not as a Bitcoin related concept, could revolutionize any number of things in which ledgers are kept and maintained. And a lot of examples that have come up have talk about, for example, land management and title deeds, those sorts of things. Those types of transfers can be made definitively and provably now through an open source decentralized network rather than by a central authority like some sort of property records office or some sort of central state administrator. So it can completely disintermediate a number of different industries, not just financial, but as I say, things like record management, land management, those types of things. So real estate, these types of innovations are already happening. But when we look specifically at the financial aspects of this, and we look at blockchain in combination with a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, then we start to look at the potential for the disintermediation of the financial system itself. And one of the really, truly powerfully disruptive promises or potentials of this type of technology is the potential for everyone to truly be their own banker. We are moving to the point where it is at least feasible to imagine the disintermediation of almost every aspect of the financial system that clearinghouses and large banks with their lending functions, all of these types of services now, at least theoretically, can devolve down to the individual level. It's just a question of whether or not that's the direction people want to go in and the direction they put their interests in. But it is possible at least to think about banking the world's unbanked, the billions of people who do not have access to the banking system as it exists right now, not by getting them on board with some major international bank as it exists, but by getting them on board with a cryptocurrency where they don't even need a traditional bank account at all.
Definitely. And how could it also be used for nefarious purposes by the central banks?
So central banks have obviously expressed quite a bit of interest in this, and increasingly so in recent years. And one example of that is a white paper that the Bank for International Settlements, which is sometimes called the Central Bank of Central Banks in Basel, Switzerland, put out recently. They put out a white paper on central bank cryptocurrencies. And the idea is that cryptocurrencies, of course, can be public and permissionless and open and decentralized. They can also be private and permissioned and closed and strictly controlled. And if a cryptocurrency is administered in that way, then one can see how it would be appealing to the central bankers who would be interested in taking the efficiencies that are built into a blockchain system, a cryptocurrency system, and using those for the benefit of the central bank. So essentially issuing a new type of fiat, but instead of physical paper or Federal Reserve notes, it could be a new Fed coin or something along those lines. And one can imagine how that could very quickly become a almost unimaginable tool of totalitarianism, given that the blockchain would have a permanent stored ledger of every single transaction that ever takes place. And if all of those transactions are being governed by a network that is itself completely controlled by, say, a central bank, then everyone who has access to that, everyone who has a wallet in that system, would presumably have so at the benefit or at the behest of the central bank that's the central authority. And so they would be able to tie every single transaction that you ever make directly to you as an individual and track absolutely everything that you do, everything that you interact with, everything that you buy, everything that you purchase, when, where, how much you spent for it, and potentially also would be able to revoke your wallet if they decided that you're being a naughty citizen for whatever reason. So that really is the nightmare scenario that a lot of people have been warning about for generations, really, with the idea of a cashless society where there is absolutely zero privacy and zero room for dissent, because ultimately you can be removed from the economic system at the behest of the central administrators. And that is possible by a centrally controlled and centrally administered, closed and permissioned blockchain-enabled cryptocurrency.
Now, what is your perspective on how people can help prevent this from happening? Is it just speaking out, or is it not, if the first steps were going to take place, not giving in to those first steps or going along with them?
Yes, I think certainly making the active choice to not adopt or use cryptocurrency that is being issued by a central authority for such a purpose would be obviously the most important thing that anyone could do. But the other side of that is to use cryptocurrency in the way that it was intended, or at least that some people have intended it for, which is as a type of, I suppose, pirate money might be the best analogy of putting it right now, which is that it is possible to use cryptocurrencies more or less pseudonymously. There is no anonymous use of cryptocurrency at this point, precisely because, as we know, the NSA and other GCHQ and other agencies like that do have access to the trunk lines of the internet. So it would be rather naive to think that we're able to mask internet traffic and really baffle them with that. But at any rate, transactions can remain pseudonymous. And if they are handled the right way, they can be done directly peer-to-peer without the influence of third-party middlemen, including across international state boundaries. And that can enable a new type of market, a cryptocurrency market internationally. Right now, everyone is focused on what is the price of Bitcoin in dollars. which is precisely the wrong question to be asking if you're looking at this as a truly disruptive technology. The real question would be, what can I actually get with these Bitcoin without having to change anything into dollars, without having to buy any Bitcoin with dollars? Can I earn Bitcoin? Can I sell things for Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin in particular? There are many, many different cryptocurrencies. But the point would be to try to create a cryptocurrency economy that is not dependent on that interface with the fiat currency economy. So I think the people who are interested in furthering this as a tool for freedom and as a potential for bringing about that disintermediation of the financial system should be using this cryptocurrency for those intentions, and should be trying to find ways that they can actually participate in a cryptocurrency economy without having to interface with the fiat currency economy. And that's difficult to do precisely because it has been made extremely difficult by all of the regulations that have been placed around this, but it is still possible. And I think people should be looking for the best cryptocurrencies to enable those types of transactions to happen. And I'm not convinced by the merits of any particular one at this point. I think it's still very much an open market, and perhaps the best cryptocurrency for such a purpose hasn't been invented yet. But developers who are out there looking for this type of technology should be out there developing it rather than simply waiting for it to appear.
Now, I know you've talked about on this show, and I know a lot of other people, other guests I have on, have talked about how the markets are rigged, and how, it seems like the governments really control the markets to a big extent. Now, with respect to cryptocurrencies, though, it seems like, do you think that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that exist right now that aren't issued by, for example, a central bank, do you think that those can be manipulated?
They certainly can, and I think we see the first signs of how that would be done by the fact that Bitcoin is now being traded on futures markets, which obviously allows the types of manipulations that we've seen in the regular markets to seep into the crypto space. But again, only in those interactions between the cryptocurrency and the fiat economy. So again, when you're looking at the Bitcoin price in dollars, then yes, that dollar price can be manipulated by people buying into the futures markets or dumping or some naked short selling or those types of tricks that we've seen in the manipulated markets for a very long time. But again, if we're looking at it as an in itself use value, if you can actually purchase goods for cryptocurrency, then that is less prone to manipulation precisely because although, again, there are many different cryptocurrencies with different protocols, but Bitcoin, for example, there will only ever be 21 million of them ever created. And that limited supply will, by its very nature, assuming a cryptocurrency economy develops, will create a deflationary asset. It will, over time, it will appreciate in value simply because there are few of them and more people trying to chase those few and fewer Bitcoin. So that is in and of itself, it's baked into the cake that there is a certain value to that. However, again, it's when we start creating financial derivatives based on the price of Bitcoin and things like that, then that price in dollars can be manipulated. So I think often, in fact, very much like I've said with the standard normal quote unquote economy and the stock markets, I don't think people should be looking at the dollar value as being the gauge for how valuable something is. I think in this case, especially when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's the use value. Can you actually purchase things in the real world with it? Can you go on vacation with it? Can you purchase a house with it? Those will be the deciding factors as to the real underlying value of these things, not whatever its dollar price at this or that time is.
Definitely. Now, moving our focus slightly, I'd like to discuss the topic of market manipulation, and also you recently were reporting on how finally the mainstream media is actually talking about manipulation as well in the markets.
That's right. So this goes to a story that I think my favorite headline was from CNBC, which said that investors fear after Japan move, the last of the global market punch bowls are being taken away. And what they're talking about is that the Bank of Japan recently, in fact, not even decided to end their bond purchases, which they've been doing. And for people who don't know, the Bank of Japan has been engaging in outright purchases of Japanese government bonds to the tunes of billions of dollars per month, every single month for the last 5 years. The Bank of Japan did not announce they were going to end that. They are really just saying they're taking their foot off the gas pedal a little and paring back some of those purchases. And the reaction from the financial press was quite telling, like CNBC, talking about investors fearing the punch bowl is being taken away. Well, what do they mean? Well, of course, the underlying reality, which is universally understood and almost never acknowledged, is that the bond purchases of the BOJ or the European Central Bank or some of these other central banks around the world have been precisely what has been spiking the punch bowl, what has been keeping these markets up over the last several years. This has been the euphoria of this post-Lehman world, in which there has been remarkably little economic growth over the past decade, and yet we have these incredible markets where we're hitting record highs seemingly every week. How on earth can this happen? Well, of course it is because the central banks have been quite openly and quite on the record manipulating the price of everything in the economy, really. Not only bonds, but in fact in Japan also the BOJ has become a top 10 shareholder of 90% of the companies in the Nikkei 225 by purchasing exchange traded funds over the last several years. So the Bank of Japan is really in every way has been propping up the Japanese economy over the last several years. And it's not alone in that. As I say, it's the European Central Bank. It's the Bank of England. It's been the Federal Reserve until quite recently. And so I think what we're seeing is now that the central banks are saying, well, look, now that we've got a little bit of enthusiasm going in the markets, it looks like things might be picking up. We'll just start to take away a few of these extra trinkets that we've been throwing in the markets. And already investors are starting to fear and get nervous, as the mainstream press is telling us.
All right. Well, James Corbett, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, are there any last thoughts you'd like to add, and where can our viewers find you online?
Well, I hope that they will look into that documentary we were talking about. It's called The Bitcoin PSYOP. It's available for free at corbettreport.com. And I think it's important precisely because, again, as I say, this is such an important technology, and it could go in many very different directions. And I think people need to understand this technology, at least the very basics of it, before forming a well-considered opinion of it. So I hope people will at least dip their toe into that water. As I say, that and all of my other work is available for free at corbettreport.com.
All right. Once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me on.